Alrighty, g'day. In this video, I am going to explain how I applied the new IB Psychology essay rubric. Now, this is for the new exams, the new course starting May 2019. Right, so what you're looking at here is the new rubric. And there's been a few questions that's changed. I actually think it's an improvement from the last one, I really do. But there are a couple of things that are a little bit confusing. And I just want to reiterate that this is my application of the rubric. This is how I'm interpreting it. This is how I'm using it. And so, yeah, this is not the IB official word on this because no one's been through the examining for the new course yet, and there's still a lot of questions that are raised here. So again, this is just my approach. Now, Criterion 8, focus on the question. What does this mean to explain the problem or the issue? I interpret this as, I mark this as my student's introduction. From their introduction, do they outline what they're going to write about, and do they really clearly get to the heart of the matter? And how they do that is they include three things. They outline their central argument. What's the core concept they're going to explain in their answer as it relates to the question? What's the evidence they're going to use, and what's the counter-argument, the critical thinking they're going to show? And so really we've got criterion B, C, and D. So my students in their introduction to outline those three things. And I think it's the introduction of the counter-argument that's really going to help them explain the problem or the issue. It's a difficult phrasing there, right? What is the problem or issue? We're talking about neuroplasticity. Like, what's the problem here? What's the issue? But I think that's when you get the counter argument. You're going, yes, this is this, and the evidence, but is where you get the problem or the issue. That's how I'm teaching it to my students. Then we get into the knowledge and understanding. This to me is I want my students to begin with a central argument, a core thing that they're going to explain as it relates to the question. Now, remember that IB psychology questions, there are 5 different types. The question will be about variables and behavior, theories or models, research methods, ethical considerations, or research related to insert topic here. So for the first 4, so for those 5. So for all of those 5, there's going to be a central argument. There's going to be a central explanation. There's going to be an explanation of how the variable affects the behavior, or the relationship there, the use of the research method, or the technique, if you're looking at the biological one, the summary of the theory or model, the explanation of the ethical consideration, how it relates to a topic, and the research related to a topic is the summary of the topic itself to contextualize the research that it's related to. So knowledge and understanding is I want an explanation that shows their conceptual understanding of a core topic in their work. So this is what I'm looking for here. So, and this also includes, like, if they're defining key terms, and they're explaining the connection, they're explaining a core concept. Then we get into use of research. This is the supporting evidence. So this is where they're using studies to support the central argument that they've just made. If they've explained variables and behavior relationship, then they use the studies to support that, right, where they learned that from. Theories and models, studies that demonstrate those theories and models. Research methods, studies that demonstrate how and why they use. Same with ethical considerations and research related to the topic. Well, their central argument was the topic, the outlining it, and then here is the study, here's the research that is and how it's related to that topic. So this is the use of studies. And then we get to criterion D, critical thinking. Essays, I'm looking for at least two studies in their evidence. And criterion D, critical thinking. So after they've got their argument, their supporting studies, and then they get into the critical thinking. Yes, we've seen that, but are there limitations with the evidence? Are there alternative explanations? Are there ethical considerations with the research? Right, some counter argument that is relevant to the question, and that's their critical thinking. A tricky one is, what if a student in their counter argument they're using an alternative explanation and they use studies to support that? That's a bit of a judgment call. What I would say with that one is, if they've used the study in an interesting study in a really an interesting way, and that has required some critical thinking to use the study to have a counter argument to what they've already said, then I'm going to include it in the critical thinking. But if they've just spent a whole page just summarizing another study to go, hey, look at this study that I know, then I might give them I might include it in this use of research, right? If they haven't really thought critically about it, but they're just using the time again to summarize a study in that much detail. But that is a tricky one, and that's a bit of a judgment call. And then clarity and organization. For me, basically, this is how clear is your language? Are you using the right terminology so I understand what you're trying to convey? Have you followed a structure? Is your argument coherent? And you've got your evidence is explained in a clear and logical way, and your answer makes sense. So this is how I apply the rubric, and I think I do think it's an improvement from the previous one. And yeah, like I said, so I want my students to have 5 things in their answer: introduction, central argument, supporting evidence, counter argument, conclusion. Now, there's some exceptions to this. For example, and I'll do a whole other video about writing essays and exam answers. But just quickly, if they have to say, if they're talking about 2 research methods, rinse and repeat, right? Explain how and why, evidence, counter argument, and then do the same for the second method. Explain how and why, evidence, counter argument. So it's a framework, it's a guideline, but it can be broken. Okay, and what I've just added down here, you can pause the video and have a look at this if you want to see it a bit more, like if you want to make notes of it. This is how I grade, and this is for grade 12. This is for year 2 of the course. Year 1 is a little bit more lenient because it's their first year in the course, right? So I grade my year 2s different to my year 1s, but I'm only change a mark of this. So yeah, if they get 21, this is an A+. So for those of you that have to have a letter grade as well. Now what you might be thinking is, for experienced teachers here going, man, like 19 out of 22, that's pretty high. You're looking at a 7, or even a 17 out of 22. You're on 6 and 7 range. It's only B+. I tend to grade a couple of points more generous than the IB, and this is reflected in my breakdown here, my boundaries, simply because I don't know. I do just interpret these. I think the IB sometimes has some unrealistic expectations from some of the example answers that I've seen. Like 1,500 words, and they get 14, and to me they look pretty good. And these are this is 1 hour by hand, so I do tend to grade a little bit more generously, and that's shown. But having said that, my students that get A+ tend to get 7s. Those who get A's tend to get 6s. B+ and B's tend to be in the 5s, 4s, and then the 3s, and then we don't really get down here, or we won't talk about it. So it is pretty consistent with the IB grading. So that's that. I hope this explanation has helped. My biggest advice for new teachers though is, don't try and think, what would an examiner say? In my first years of teaching IB psychology, I'd be giving feedback and I'd be trying to think, what would an examiner say here? And it just drove me crazy, and it was unhelpful, and it didn't work because examiners will all say something different. I was seeing this again and again and again. So choose figure out your expectations. What are you expecting, and what do you want to see in your answers? And see your own framework and your own criteria, and mark according to that, right? Because that's that's I think the best advice I can give, because otherwise you're not going to be able to guess what an examiner will say and what they're going to think. And so I really think it is important that you are when you set a test question or an exam question or a mock exam, like, take some time to go, okay, what did we study here, and what am I expecting them to write about, and what am I looking for? And create your own mark schemes that way, and mark according to those. Who gives a shit if it's not exactly what the IB would do or an IB examiner would do in theirs, right? This is your class, it's your course, and the more years you teach, the closer you'll be able to get those two in aligned, what you're marking and what the IB is going to get. But you're never going to get it perfect, so don't drive yourself crazy trying to worry about it. Be the king of your kingdom, I think is the best advice I can give, and just be confident with it. So anyway, I hope this helped. Cheers.